Hi everyone, my name is Giovanna Proença, and today we're going to talk about the project Build a Peer-to-Peer Network of WEB3 of freeCodeCamp. Basically in this project we're going to work with peer-to-peer connection. That is something a little bit tricky, but basically it's a group of computers that shares files or other things. They have a connection in a network, okay? Like you can see here in this image, we have different computers and they have this connection and we're going to build this, okay? In our case, each computer here will be called as node, all right? And we're going to build at least 3 nodes and we're going to create a connection between them. We have several tests to run and we have some user stories to help us through it, okay? And then once we pass the test, we finish this project. So let's see the files we have with us. So basically in this project, we're only going to work with the index.js. All right, so basically in here, we're only going to work with this file. We have a folder called node that will store everything we're going to write about the node to create this peer-to-peer connection. And this index.js is inside of our node 1, okay? So once we finish creating our index.js in node 1, we're going to clone this node using this file here. They already let available. We're not going to add any code in here. We're just going to use it to clone the folder, everything we have inside the folder to build a new node or a new computer in our image. And then we can also use this delete nodes that will delete all the nodes we created in case if we have any bug or any error and we don't need to manually delete it. We can just use this file, okay? So let's start seeing what we're gonna do. So we have to start by creating a WebSocket server listening to a port in its .env file. So what is this WebSocket that this means? Basically, we're gonna create an application that will listen to the ports that are available. If you see in here, we have a file called nonpeers.json and we have here the ports that are available. We have this 4001 and 4003, okay? Once we're able to listen to these ports, we're going to send a message, all right? We're gonna send a message this type handshake and we're gonna send an array. And this array should be the address of your server, that your server is connected, including the server of their own address. Then if we receive this message, we're gonna do some extra things. So we're gonna attempt to connect these 2 nodes. If we're successful, we're gonna send a message. If we're not, we're gonna send an error message. And once we close, we're gonna send a close message as well. And we need to keep track of the ports that we were able to connect or not. So this is a little bit of the general idea of what we're gonna do. Okay, so let's start with the first step, that is creating a WebSocket server listening to the ports that we have available. So basically here we have a variable called myPorts. So this will be the variable that we know about our own port for this node. And now we need to create this WebSocket server. If you see here in the hints, we can create the WebSocket server using this. So if we use this const my server equals to new WebSocket server, and inside here we put our port. So here I'm gonna say my port. This is the variable that's storing our port. We're gonna create a server listening to the given port, okay? Then we're gonna try to run a connection to the server, okay? And now we're gonna see the second bullet point. So in this case, we're gonna use my server.on, and what we're trying to do, we're trying to connect, in this case, connection. Then we're gonna open up, we're gonna create this variable here, socket, and we're gonna trigger a function, okay? Once we trigger a function, we're gonna display a message in our terminal saying that the connection is working, okay? So here we're gonna say console.log connection received. So this means that we're trying to connect, okay? Then we have this third message here, this third bullet point that is using this message, data strings, blah, 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 that runs the socket sends a message to your server. And here they're telling us to nest in within the connection function. So inside of our connection, we're trying to send a message. And what will be this message? If you take a look in here, the message will be this one that they are telling us to do. It will be this type handshake and the data array that we're gonna see in a bit. So I will already add this message in here. Socket.on, and here we are expecting for a message. Okay, then we're gonna add here this variable data string, and then we're gonna trigger this function. What are we gonna do inside this function? We're gonna console.log the data string so far. Okay, so here we're gonna do console.log message received, and we're gonna display the data string. The other part we're gonna do in the future by creating that handshake they ask us to do. So let's check if it's working. Here in our terminal, I'm gonna do cd node1, and I'm gonna do node index.js, and we should see here connection received and the message. And here we are receiving an error. So let's see. And this error message is because in here we need to say port, colon, and then we say my port, the variable. So this is the structure. I think this is the one that is giving us a problem. So let's run it again. If I run node index.js, So here, if you see the terminal, we are receiving the message connection received. So this means that we received something. And if we scroll down a little bit, we have this message received and the data string that we are receiving, okay, from other connections. So far it's working. This is good. I ran the test and we're passing the first two. So now we're gonna work with creating this connection, us sending the message. Now our second user story is telling us that when a WebSocket server starts, it should attempt to open a socket connection to all the addresses in the no-peers.json, that file here that we're seeing, okay? And we should use this predefined non-peers function that we have. So here we have the non-peers that is already getting all the peers that we have available, okay? So basically in here, we're gonna create a function that we're gonna try to connect, okay? But there are some things that we need to be aware. We're not gonna try to connect with ourselves, so we need to check if we're not trying to connect with our own address. And another thing that is important, we need to keep track of the addresses that we already tried to connect. So here we have a list where we have this, we're gonna store all the addresses we're trying to connect, and this doesn't mean that it was successful or not. This just means that we tried. And we have another list where we have the connected addresses, and in these connected addresses, we are storing all the addresses we were able to connect. So the attempting will store all the addresses we tried out, and the connected addresses will store everything we were successful about these attemptings, okay? So we need to be aware of this when we are creating our connect function. So here I'm gonna create a function called connect, and we're gonna receive an address of our peers, okay? And like I said, first, to start our connection, we need to check these three things. So first, we're gonna check if address is different of our my address. We have a variable called my address that is storing our own address. Then, so this is our first check. The other check we need to do is, we need to check if the address we're working right now is not an address we already checked before. So here, not attempting to connect address.includes address. So here we are removing the address so we don't try this connection again. And we're checking if it's not already in our connect address list. Okay, so and it's not connected addresses.includes our address. So this way we are avoiding making more work than we should. Then after we do this, we're gonna send a message saying that we're attempting to connect to this address. So here I'm gonna say console.log attempting to connect space. Here I'm gonna put the address, and this is it, okay? Once we do this, I'm gonna store in our attempting to connect addresses list the address that we're trying to connect, okay? So here I'm gonna add this address in our attempting to connect address. So every time we're trying to add a new item in our list, we use push, and here address. And push, if we hover here, it will append new element to the end of the array. We already saw how to work with push in the previous two projects, okay? So if you don't remember, please watch the other projects before. This is pretty much what we need to do right now. And then we're gonna use this non-peers that they are mentioned. And here we're gonna do a for each loop, because this non-peers is a list, and we're gonna check all the peers we have available, and we're gonna call the connect function. So here non-peers.for each, and the for each loop, it's a loop that we're gonna do in this list. And then we're gonna create a variable called peer, for example, and in every iteration we're going to call our function connect peer. Okay, so this is pretty much what they're asking us to do in the second user stories. Now let's go to the next one. Now in our third item, whenever a socket connection to a server is established, it should send a message that is a stringify JSON object with this type handshake and data that will be the addresses that we're connected to. And here, one other thing we should keep track. In the item 5, you should keep track of all the addresses a server is connected to, and here we're going to use the connected addresses array. And we should remove this address from our attempting list. Okay, so basically here we have several things to do. So let's start. Basically, we need to check if the connection was established. And how can we do this? If you see here in hints, we have this second bullet points that runs when a connection to a server has been established. So here we're gonna say socket.on connect open, and here we're gonna run a function. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to display a message in our console.log to say that this connection has been established. So here, console.log, we're going to say connection to the address open. Okay, so here we're telling that this connection was open. Then we're gonna remove our element from our attempting list, and we're gonna add in our connect list. So to do this here, we're gonna use a splice, because the splice, let's see in here. So I'm gonna write it down, and we're gonna see the message that we see when we're using this function. Basically, splice, it removes elements from an array, okay, so it will remove the element of the address we're working. But how can we get the index of this address? We're gonna use the name address and we're gonna use the index of this. Okay, so we want to remove, if you want, you can create a const index just to make your life easier. And we're going to store the index of the address we want to remove from our attempting to connect address. So here we can use attempting to connect index of, and this will get the index of our address in the list. And then we're going to use a splice to remove that particular index because we want to remove this this address from our attempting tries. Okay, so here we're going to use index and I'm going to use the number 1. That is something that it's asked when we're using splice. Then once we are removing from our attempting to connect address, we're going to insert that address in our connected address. So here connected, we need to keep track all the address we were able to connect. So here we're going to do .push. So we remove from the attempting because we're not attempting anymore. We were successful and now we add in our connected. And here I want to add address. Okay. Once we do this, now they are telling us that we need to send a message. So this is the final part we need to do. We need to send this stringify JSON object of type handshake and data. That will be the data an array of addresses your server is connected to, including the server's own address. So in here, let me split into different lines. In here, we're gonna send this message. So how can we send a message to our server? Basically, we can use this socket.send to send information to a server. So here's socket.send, and here we're gonna send a data and we're gonna create this data in here. So I'm gonna click enter. I'm gonna write it down here, the data we want to send. Here they're telling us that this should be a JSON object. So here I'm gonna do a JSON.stringify to convert this into a string, and we're gonna send the object that we want. So in this case, we're gonna write it down type, and remember you need to write type in lowercase, otherwise you will fail the test. And here handshake all uppercase, handshake. And then you need to send data. And what will be our data? Like they're telling us, the data should be an array with the addresses that your server is connected, including the server's own address. So here we're going to create an array, and I'm going to add my address, okay? And I want to write it down, the connected address that we have. And that's pretty much what we need. Okay, so this way we're sending the message that we want. All right, now before we run the test, we're going to work with the other items. And then we run everything to see if it's working. Basically, to make it work, now we need to work with the scenario where the connection is closed, or if we have an error. Okay, and then we're able to try it out. So let's work with the scenario that the connection is closed. So we can use here this third bullet point, so socket.on, and we're gonna do here close. We're gonna trigger this function, and what we're gonna do inside, we're gonna say a console.log message saying that the connection was closed. So connection to address closed. Okay, this is the first thing we want to do. Then we need to remove this connection, this server, from our connected address. We need to remove this address in our connected address list because we're not connected anymore. So we're gonna do a splice again to remove. Okay, so first I'm gonna create a const index to get the index of the address we want to get. So here connected addresses dot index of our address. And then I'm gonna do a splice to remove it. So here connected addresses.splice, and I want to remove here the index, and I'm gonna use the number 1 after this. This is pretty much what we need to do in this case. Now let's work with the error. So if we have an error, we're gonna display a message, and we're not gonna add this address in our connected because we're not able to add, but we need to remove from our attempting because we tried and we weren't successful. So we're gonna remove from our attempting. So here's socket.on error. Here we're gonna use the 4th bullet point. Then we're gonna trigger a function, and now we're gonna handle this. So we're gonna display a console.log to display this message. So error connecting to, and then we're gonna say the address. We had an error. Okay. And now we need to remove this address from our attempting list. Okay. Let me see what I made wrong. Oh, I forgot a comma in here. So now I'm gonna create a const index equals to attempting to connect address dot index of address. And now our splice will be a little bit different Because if this is our last element that we are removing from our list, this splice won't work. So we need to check if it's the last element or not. So in here, we need to check if our index is greater or equals to 0, because this means that this is the last element. So here, index greater or equals to 0. And then we're gonna write it down, our statement. And in here, we're gonna remove using splice. So attempting to connect, we're gonna remove this from our list, index and 1. Okay, this is pretty much what we need to do so far. Now we have one extra thing, and then we're able to test and do the testing. Now our final part is working with the message we are receiving, because this data string in here that we're seeing is this kind of a list, right? This type handshake data and a list of the servers we have available. So right now we need to get this message, and we're going to convert this into a JavaScript, because right now this is a string. All right, and once we convert this into a JavaScript object, we're able to get inside of this list of available servers, and then we're trying to connect to these available servers. So we're creating this network, the final touch in our network. So here I'm gonna create a variable const message, and I'm gonna do json.parse that convert this object, this string that we're receiving, into a JavaScript object. And in here we're gonna convert this data string. Okay, once we receive our data string, the message will be this structure, okay, that is a dictionary. How can we access data? We can use the key data, and then as you can see, the value for the key data, it's a list. So we can do a loop in this list of available servers, available addresses, and then we're gonna try to connect again. So here we're gonna do message.data for each to loop in this list, and here we're gonna get address, and then we're gonna call our function connect address. Okay, so we're connecting address with our known peers and the peers we are receiving from other computers, the peers of the other computers that are our peers. So we're creating a network, not only the ones that we know, but the ones that our friends know as well. Okay, and this close our try. So I'm gonna close in here and let's test if it's working. So in here, if you can see my terminal, we're gonna create, I'm gonna go back here, do cd ... and I'm gonna clone 2 nodes, because right now we have only 1 node, this node 1. I'm gonna create more 2. So here we're gonna do node clone -node.js, and then I'm gonna do this again, and we have here 2 new nodes, 2 and 3. Now I'm gonna open up 3 terminals, okay, and I'm gonna enter in each of them. So the first one I'm gonna do cd node 1, in the second one I'm gonna do cd node 2, and in the third one I'm gonna do cd node 3. This is the best way to try it out, because now we're actually checking if we have this connection, okay? So in the first node, I'm gonna do node index.js, and let's see the message we are receiving. We have a issue. Here it's telling us that we have a problem here in the socket.on open. So let's see. Here I'm doing socket.on. So the problem here, it's because I skipped one step that is creating what is socket, right? So I skipped the first bullet point. Before we work here with our line 35, we need to create this const socket, otherwise it won't work. New WebSocket address. Okay, I skip this line. So to make this work, let's clear again. I'm gonna close these two terminals that I have open, and since I did this change, the other files don't have, I will delete them. I will delete the nodes. So here I'm gonna do nodes delete nodes.js, and this file will remove the nodes 2 and 3 for us. Sorry, I need to do cd ... and then I can call the function node delete nodes, and it's removing for us. Now I'm gonna create the nodes again. So here node create node twice. So it's creating the node 2 and the node 3 again. Now I'm gonna open up the terminal again, and let's try it out. Hopefully it will work right now. So if I do cd node 1, okay, here I'm gonna do cd node 2, and here I'm gonna do cd node 3. So now we are inside of each node we have. Now let's try to start our connection. So if I do node index.js in here it's saying attempting to connect to localhost 4003, and we have an error when we were trying to connect with 4003 because it's not open and we have this connection closed. Now if I open up this one, so node index.js, let's see in here. So now we are receiving a connection because we open up this connection here, and we receive here attempting to connect, error to connect with the third one, but we were open to connect with one of the available ones. Let me expand. So we were able to connect with our localhost 2 and 1. We have this message that we are receiving, and here we have this message as well. But now if I open our third one, we might not have any issue. We're gonna be able to connect with all of our servers. So if I do this, we are receiving message in the first node, second, and the third. So this is pretty good because now we're able to see this connection in between the nodes. This seems that it's working now. Let's test. So in here it seems to be working. Now if we run our test, let's see. And remember, you need to run at least 3 nodes. Okay, otherwise you won't pass. And like you can see here, we passed all the tests. So this is pretty much for this project, alright? I hope you enjoyed this content. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye. If you would like to have full support from programming expert via Telegram group and group coaching, check the description below.